Hey, magandang buhay! So ako si Sir Ben at narito ako upang i-discuss ang about sa half-angle identities. Ready ka na? Great! So let us have the first example. So we have here given that cosine A is equivalent to 5 over 13 and A is in the first quadrant. Determine the value of sine A over 2, cosine A over 2, and tangent A over 2. So in this problem, we can solve this in two ways. It's either we memorize the formulas, okay, the formulas that is being taught to personally being taught to me when I was in high school or in college, or we can use the method that I learned from Sir Ike Prudente. That is the use of Vedic mathematics. Okay, so using this method, it is easy if we will just simply identify tangent A over 2. But if you're going to identify sine A over 2 and cosine A over 2, this method would be a difficult one. So, in this video, it is a combination of both. So, for identifying cosine A over 2 and sine A over 2, we will use the identities. While for tangent A over 2, we will use the Vedic mathematics. Okay? So, this combination is the, if I may say, the easiest way in identifying these three trigonometric functions. Okay? So let us now focus with the first example. So for us to identify the values of sine A over 2, cosine A over 2, and tangent A over 2, what we're going to do here is to identify the adjacent side, the opposite side, and the hypotenuse. Remember, the adjacent side, this will be the value of x. The opposite side, this will be the value of y. While the hypotenuse, this will be the value of r. Okay? So, since cosine A is in the first quadrant, A is in here. So, based from the given, cosine A is equivalent to 5 over 13, meaning that 5 is adjacent, while 13 is the hypotenuse. For us to identify the opposite side, we are just going to use the Pythagorean theorem. So, applying the Pythagorean theorem here, the opposite side of A will be 12. Okay? So, remember this one. Since A is in the first quadrant, that means that A is between 0 to 90, and we are identifying sine A over 2, cosine A over 2, and tangent A over 2. What we're going to do is to divide that range by 2. So, 0 divided by 2 is still 2, A over 2. So, A, when you divide by 2, it will become A over 2, and 90, when you divide by 2, it will become 45. So, meaning that A over 2 is still in the first quadrant. Okay? Now, let us now identify the value of cosine A over 2. So, the formula for cosine A over 2 is positive negative the square root of 1 plus cosine A all over 2. So, what I did here was I just simply change cosine A by 5 over 13. Next, simplify that one. Again, since A over 2 is in the first quadrant, our answers sine A over 2, cosine A over 2, and tangent A over 2 will also be positive. Now, since all the trigonometric functions in quadrant 1 are positive. Simplifying this one, so cosine A over 2 will be 3 square root of 13 over 13. Next, for sine A over 2, the formula for sine A over 2 is positive negative square root of 1 minus cosine A all over 2. So, simplifying that one, and we will get that sine A over 2 is equivalent to 2 square root of 13 over 13. For tangent A over 2, we're going to use the formula y over x plus r. Wherein, just like what I said a while ago, y will be the opposite side, x will be the adjacent side, and r will be the hypotenuse. Simplifying that fraction, and we will get 2/3. Next example. So we have here, identify the value of sine b over 2, cosine b over 2, and tangent b over 2 if sine b is equal to negative 2/3 and tangent b is greater than 0. Okay? So, again, let us first identify the opposite side, the adjacent side, and the hypotenuse of angle B. It says here that sine B is negative 2/3. So, meaning, sine is only negative at quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. The other condition is that tangent B is greater than 0. So meaning tangent is positive and tangent is only positive at the first quadrant and the third quadrant. So meaning sine B or angle B is in the third quadrant. So since B is in the third quadrant, so the range of angle B will be from 180 to 270. When we divide those all of those by 2, so B divided by 2, that would be B over 2. 180 divided by 2, that will be 90. And 270 divided by 2, that will be 135. So meaning, angle B is from 90 to 135. So meaning, angle B over 2 is from 90 to 135. So it means that angle B over 2 is actually in the second quadrant. Okay? So let us focus first for angle B. So angle B now, so this is angle B. Sine B is equal to negative 2/3. So the opposite side will be negative 2. The hypotenuse will be 3. And using the Pythagorean theorem, we can identify its adjacent side. And the adjacent side will be negative square root of 5. So in this case, we can now identify what is the value of cosine B. Cosine B is adjacent over hypotenuse. And that will be negative square root of 5 over 3. Now, let us identify sine B over 2. So using the formula, again, that is positive negative square root of 1 minus cosine B all over 2. Remember that sine, again, B over 2 is in the second quadrant and sine in the second quadrant is positive. Therefore, our answer here must be positive. So substituting the cosine B by negative square root of 5 over 3, simplifying that one, and we will get square root of 6 times the quantity of square root of 3 plus square root of 5 all over 6. Next, for cosine B over 2, it will be the positive negative, the square root of 1 plus cosine B all over 2. And again, B over 2 is in the second quadrant, so therefore, cosine will be negative. So it means that cosine B over 2 must be negative in this specific example. So again, cosine B, I change cosine B into negative square root of 5 over 3. And then, simplifying that one, and we will get negative square root of 6 times the quantity of the square root of 3 minus the square root of 5 all over 6. For tangent B over 2, so tangent B over 2, that is equivalent to y over x plus r. So in this case, what we're going to do is just simply substitute the values of y, x, and r. Okay? So y here is negative 2, and then x here will be negative square root of 5, while our hypotenuse is 3. Simplifying this one, and tangent B over 2 will be negative 3 plus square root of 5 all over 2. And tangent in the second quadrant is negative. So that is how we deal with some problems that involves half-angle identity. So again, I suggest for identifying the sine A over 2 and cosine A over 2, we use the formula, while for tangent A over 2, we use the method under the Vedic mathematics. Okay? So with that, maraming salamat sa pagkikinig and magandang buhay!